I spoke to Pastor Drake's concerning speaking today. I did not know that one of your members would actually speak about Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to make just a couple of brief comments about that in a minute. But I want to remind everyone, especially in New York, to stay hydrated, especially if you're a person of color. Heat stroke is a medical emergency. If you are of darker skin, you tend to attract more heat. Your inner temperature regulating system is like a microwave. And so you get dehydrated a lot faster. This would be a good time to make sure you're drinking 5 to 6 bottles of water today, whether you're sweating or not, so that you don't become a victim of heat stroke, especially if you're a person of color. So that's free advice from the doc to you. The second thing is regarding Alzheimer's, I've actually done extensive research on Alzheimer's and have come up with a preventative program for men and women based upon 20 years of data. So you might say, well, how come we've never heard this, or what's going on? How come it's never come to the day of light? Unfortunately, in the United States of America, if money is not involved or a way to make money off of people's suffering, the data is hidden. That's number one. Number two, though my name, Colin Ross, sounds like the name of an old, seasoned Jewish man, when a lot of people see who I am and see this, unfortunately, a lot of the research is shoved to the side. I've often said this jokingly, but it's quite serious. If the Lord doesn't come, the medical community will wait till I pass away, then start actually reading the research, find a face and a voice and a way to make money, and then start sharing it. 15 years ago, I published to the World Health Organization that Savital, stevia, all of these artificial sweeteners based upon the glycemic index are cancer causing. They laughed at me and pushed me to the side. And I told them at the same time, the best sweetener is actual natural bees honey. Now, 15 years later, they're telling you half of the story, which is be careful with Savital, use stevia and processed sugar because it can be cancer causing. They published that 15 years ago and actually gave an alternative. But let me tell you what the bigger picture is about all this. And I'm sharing this because I want you to be informed. I'm not an intelligent man, but I'm a humble and faithful servant of God. God has let me his intelligence to help us to live a little bit better. Be receptive. I never tell people, well, I have this credential, I'm board certified in this, and I scored this on that. It's never about me. And I think that is why God says, David, son of Jesse, I have chosen you to share with the people this information. You don't look like the next king. You don't talk. You don't act. You don't come from a country that's very well known, but you're a humble servant of mine. And so I will lend you this information. And before we get into today's sermon, I want to share this last tidbit. The diseases are going to get worse. They're not going to get better. COVID was just a foretaste of that to come. This world is winding down. God has given us as Christians preventative measures to slow down the inevitable. My mother died from complications of Alzheimer's disease. This is not just scientific for me, it's personal. And unfortunately, what could have slowed it down, and she lived to a ripe old age of her 70s. Most people who develop Alzheimer's are dying in their early 60s. It could have been slowed down, but the medical community is not receptive to that which does not make them money. So if you want to, I publish my contact information. If you go on my website, once God gives me something for free, I don't try to make money off of it. All of the info is there. You can read it. When I have meetings with all of these people involved in healthcare and preventative medicine, the most interesting thing is you could literally see them choke when they recognize it's a good idea. It's not refutable. The research makes sense, but they don't like the packaging and the mouth and the image that it's coming from, and the fact that it will not make them money. And that's why you don't hear about it. So it is available on my website. You can download it for free. It's available on Google Scholar. I have 22 publications that God has given me knowledge about on Google Scholar, because you can just see the name and the information, but not necessarily this. So you want to definitely log into the last thing I'll say. All of these things are coming to mind. Weight loss medications. I'm meeting with a lot of organizations. I'm telling them that with these weight loss medications, first of all, they're dangerous. Second of all, God already gave us a diet plan, health plan that should keep you fit. The third thing is, I told them that most people who are developing obesity have trauma and are trauma eating and trauma maintaining and trauma surviving because of the foods numbing them dealing with reality. That anyone who is obese and has been obese for a long time needs to go through 3 months of behavioral health counseling and 3 months of nutritional counseling before one prescription of Ozempic, Wegovy, or whatever you want to use is written. Because if you don't deal with the trauma and the way you're self-medicating yourself, the minute that the drug is recalled, the lawsuits start to come, and they will, you're back to square one. You're back to going back to what you never dealt with. And when I told them this, they choked, they gagged, because it made sense, but it was coming from this and it was coming from this. So don't fool yourself. Leviticus 11, I could go on and on. Those are the simple principles of God that you want to go back to. Now let's get to the word about how to survive yet another perilous time. Is the congregation still with me? I can't, see y'all, so I don't know if you're still awake or what have you. But please, if you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Peter chapter 5. And today's scripture is 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 to 11. 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 to 11. Next time I will be with you in person. Sorry, there was a scheduling issue here, and that's why I'm not with you in person. I'm not a fan of Zoom. I want to be there. I want to see your teeth. I want to hear your amens. I want to see who's falling asleep, because unlike Santa Claus, I am taking names and checking twice who's paid attention and who's fallen asleep. But 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 to 11, I'm reading from the New King James International Version. And listen to what Peter is saying to the church. Likewise, verse 5, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you, be submissive to one another, and be clothed with humility, for God resists the proud, but give grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Resist him steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings, listen to this, are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. But may the God of all grace, who called us to his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after you have suffered a while, perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. To him be the glory and the dominion forever and ever. Amen. How to survive yet another perilous times. I want to warn you that some of the history behind this text that I will share with you, it will sound like I'm making it up. But I challenge you today not just to listen to the exegesis of this specific text and the points that Peter raises to the church during a dangerous political time, but to look it up for yourself so that you know I'm not making any of this up. But when Peter writes this text to the church, it's during a dangerous time. According to Daniel chapter 2, one of the greatest empires that would ever exist was the Roman Empire before Jesus would come. But when Peter writes this text, the great Roman Empire, an economic giant, a supposed beacon to the world, is being destroyed by just one dysfunctional family and a leader of a dysfunctional family called Nero. This text is written in AD 65, where the cross-dressing, pornography-loving exhibitionist named Nero is emperor of the great Roman Empire, and the empire is in moral decline. But you see, Nero is not a bad son that did not come from dysfunctional parents. Nero's father was a noted racist that hated immigrants. The very immigrants from Africa and other countries that had built up Rome under cheap slave labor. His father hated immigrants so much that history records that Nero's father took Nero on a journey, picked out a random slave from a random town, ran over the slave with his chariot, and laughed, telling his son it's a joke, that it's a good idea to kill the immigrants that built your kingdom. But not only did Nero have a dysfunctional father, his mother was also dysfunctional, because when her first husband died, his mother killed the second husband because the mother wanted, with union of Nero's uncle, to make Nero the leader of the party in Rome that supported family values. So Nero's mother killed her first husband, married Nero's uncle so that Nero's mother and uncle could support Nero to be the leader of the Roman party of family values. And Nero's dysfunction continued into his marriage, because when Nero got married, he did not want to have children. So when his first wife got pregnant, he tried to get her an abortion in secret, because when you're the leader of the party of family values, leading the best nation on earth at that time known as Rome, it's all right to be a hypocrite, to say one thing in public, but to do something else in private. But because he kicked his wife and the baby did not die, Nero decided that he would kill his wife because she did not want to have an abortion, while he purported to Rome that he was the leader of the party of family values. And when his first wife died, the historical account did not give us the impression that Nero secretly liked women of color, though he was a Roman man. Because when his first wife died, Nero grabbed a random slave who was a man, castrated the man, had him surgically fixed up into a woman, and made this man, a transgender, his second wife. Nero, I'm talking about, leading Rome, the supposed greatest nation in the world, leading the family of family values, and Peter is writing this text to the church during this time. Why did Nero have such success? Was he intelligent? Did he go to the best schools in Rome? No. Nero, while he was 3 years old, had inherited the real estate of the Roman Empire that his father had built up, and at 16 years of age, inherited fully the empire, and he never attributed the economic decline to what he inherited from his racist father, murderous mother, and child pornography loving uncle, to the fact that he was immature and had a 16-year-old boy's mentality, inheriting all of the Roman real estate. But when he looked to blame someone for the great decline of Rome, someone for the great decline of his multi-million-dollar inheritance, to why everything was failing. Nero started blaming the minorities who came from other countries attending the Roman universities for the decline of Rome. He started blaming the women who were tired of just being housewives and wanted to study, asking for equality, and wanting to do more to contribute to the economic situation of Rome. Nero started to blame the minorities and the women for Rome, once being a great nation, falling in decline. And so Nero set Rome on fire and started to blame the Christians for the economic demise. And Nero came up with a campaign that though Rome is burning and though Rome is falling on fire, though Rome was the greatest empire, that now where we find ourselves, that Rome is not as great as it used to be. I, Nero, want to make Rome great again. But you see, Nero didn't understand his Bible, though he claimed to be the leader of family values, because in Daniel chapter 2, kingdoms may rise, but God sets them down. Nero didn't understand that he was reading his Bible upside down, that if he read his Bible in Daniel chapter 2, when great Nebuchadnezzar had that dream of a great statue, that the gold represented Babylon and the iron represented Rome. And if you read the Bible right side up, you would know that Babylon fell and that Rome would one day fall. But when you turn the Bible upside down, you may think that you can make Rome again. But the Bible lets us know that there is no nation on this earth, there is no man that can promise you greatness and riches. What God is saying is, America, Europe, there is no nation that will once become great again, because in these times, these perilous times, when these men, when these politicians are promising greatness, God is building up a kingdom up in glory, and that kingdom will come like a stone and topple America, topple Europe, because we as Christians are sojourners in this land, and this place will not become great again. But the church is in a crosshairs. The greatest leader of Rome, with the biggest voice and the biggest microphone, is blaming the Christians for the decline. He's trying to turn the public against the church. And it is in this context that Peter gives the church 3 points on how to survive a dangerous time. Let me tell you something. If you're struggling with your health, if you're struggling with your finances, if you're struggling with what you hear on the news, if you have trauma that you have not dealt with in your life, you deal with it the best that God has given you guidance on this earth. But let me tell you, the great thing about being a Christian is waking up every day knowing that it's one day, 1 hour, 1 year closer to the second coming of Jesus Christ, when all of this stuff will be rooted and destroyed. And we shall live in a kingdom where we don't have to deal with this anymore. But Peter gives the church 3 points that I want to share with you today: how to endure, how to survive, and not be swept away in these perilous times. The first thing Peter tells the church in chapter 5, in verse 5, is number 1, young people, speak to the elders. And here's why he says that. Many of you who are immigrants, and when I went back to New York, I noticed this about the immigrants. When you came to the United States, you may have residence here, but your citizenship is based upon where you came from. I left New York 40 years ago. And 40 years later, when I visited, it was very evident based upon the culture that the immigrants have residence in New York, but their citizenship, their mental citizenship is somewhere else. The foods that you eat, the celebrations that you enjoy, though you live in Brooklyn, New York, the foods you eat, the celebrations you enjoy, even the accent that you speak with are evidence that you have residence in New York, but your citizenship comes from Jamaica or Guyana or whatever island you came from, that they may have taken you out of your country. But mentally, your citizenship is in your country of origin. But what Peter is saying, the reason why it's important for those children to speak to their parents is simply this. Many of you were blessed, had the pathway open to come to America because of God. God is who, during those perilous times, opened up the pathway for you to get the visa to come to the United States. And first generation, second generation, you preserved your culture because your residence is in New York, but your citizenship came from wherever you came from. Now, here's what Peter's saying, is that we as Christians, regardless of where you have your residence, your citizenship should be with glory. And when the young people stop talking to the old people about the culture, they begin to lose that first, second generation culture from where you came from. And when the young people start dealing with the older people in the church, the older people who knew it was God that brought them here, the older people that understand through the blessings of God, He changed their economic situation. When the young people stop talking with the old people about the importance of the church, the young people start establishing residence here, but also citizenship here. Let me tell you what I mean. A citizen of heaven knows that thou shalt not steal. A citizen of heaven knows that you respect your family. A citizen of heaven knows the importance of the Sabbath day. It's more important than a weekend, than a vacation, than celebrating the 4th of July. A citizen of heaven knows that you do right instead of doing wrong. The citizen of heaven knows that you act like Jesus and less like the devil, that regardless of your residence, that your citizenship, the old ones can remind you what church used to be like back home. When Friday night was sacred, when the families got together, and if you couldn't walk to the church, somebody picked you up on a bicycle or their motorcycle and they brought you to the church. If there was anyone in the church that did not have something to eat, the church would feed them or someone would invite them to their home. That's how church was when your citizenship spiritually is back home, though your residence is in the United States of America. And the problem with our youth today, they don't want anything to do with the old church members. They don't want to sing some of those old church songs. It's always about Kirk Franklin or whoever is the new artist. It's important for the youth to speak to the old ones. That's what Peter says as a reminder that though your residence is here, your citizenship mentally should be in glory. And this is what would change and model your behavior so that you could be a first, second, third generation representative of Jesus Christ, that you should be less American and more Christian. So Peter says, young people, speak to the old. And then some of you old people are to blame for not instilling in your children the importance of coming to church. If you're in this church right now and your children are not 18 years of age, how dare you let them have the option of staying home and sleeping? How dare you leave them at home on Instagram? And then I don't know how parents can sit right there in church and the pastor has to tell your children to get off their phone, to stop talking with their friends, and chewing gum in church. Clementina Howell was my grandmother, and she passed away many years ago. But if Clementina Howell were to be revived again, she would find that her grandson still goes to church, still prays, still knows how to sing songs from the hymnal without looking at the words, because what she instilled in her grandchildren was a citizenship from heaven, that whether you're growing up in Guyana or America or Canada, that your citizenship should follow you more than your passport. And Peter says, if the church doesn't do this, if the young do not speak to the old, if the young do not understand that you were not bought here just for the economic riches, but you were bought here so that you could worship God in freedom and in truth, that you will become a victim to the perilous times, that you'll believe that America will be great again, that you will not look forward or prepare for the second coming. Have a conversation with the old saints. Let the old saints tell you how raggedy some of the hymnals were that they sung from. The old saints can tell you how they didn't have microwaves and ovens to prepare a Sabbath meal, and how transportation was not as readily. You can get to church, young people, on the train, on the bus, Uber. So you have no excuse when your old parents, when your grandmothers and your grandfathers would do that they could, arthritis in their knees, heart conditions, coming to church nearly fainting, because they suffered from COPD, as Pastor said in his prayer. Nothing could separate them from the love of their God, sickness or illness, as long as they could breathe. Lift me to church, take me to church, because I've got a special date with Jesus. And Peter says, our young people need to understand that you've got an easier pathway to go to church. But if you don't take that pathway, you'll become a citizen here and a resident here. And here's the problem. If your citizenship is here and your residence is here, when Jesus Christ comes again, depart from me. You don't have the right gospel. You don't have the right mentality to inherit the kingdom of heaven, because your citizenship and your residence is here. Last 2 points. Secondly, Peter says that God will exalt you in due time. He knows that when the perilous times shall come, your home will not be left untouched by the perilous times. But your home can be protected from the perilous times. In the times that we live in, with a Supreme Court giving people more rights to carry guns, with America leading the world in mass killings. I don't know how some of us even leave our homes without saying a prayer. If the only time you pray is when you come to church, you don't have that protection of God, because you never know when a bullet was aimed for somebody else and it strikes you. So Peter is saying that God will exalt you in due time. Here's what he's saying. It's easy to be a Christian when everything is going right and well. Easy to be a Christian when your marriage works and your children are not acting up. Easy to be a Christian when financially you're sound. But times will come where the rich shall become poor, where the safe shall become unsafe, where those that were good neighborhoods will become bad neighborhoods. And when that time comes, that's when what's in your heart shall be revealed. But he says God will exalt you in due times. The beauty about God is whether it's a small blessing or a large blessing, he will exalt you. You will get to the point where you recognize that accolades from men mean nothing, just vain words on this earth. But when God says, this is my beloved son, cousin, parent, child, I'm very well pleased in him, that through the tribulation, through the perilous times, that God will exalt you. And the last thing that Peter says to survive this perilous times is cast all your cares on him. You know, I'm going to be 58 years old this year. And the talk amongst the church and the unchurched is about retirement. Have you shored up your retirement account? Because you can't just rely on Social Security. So they're talking to me about 403B and all, and I'm just a little boy from Brick Dam, I'm at 403B. I know a lot of science, but I don't know finances. So I have someone taking care of the finances. But here's what they said: you need 3 accounts to retire properly. Social Security, private account, another private account. Okay, I get all that. Peter says that for you to retire well, that you just have to cast all your cares upon it. Do all that financial stuff. But here's what you really need shored up: that your calling and election with God is sure. Cast your cares upon him. No matter how small or big, cast them on the Lord, because this perilous times could create mental trauma. But when you keep reminding yourself that this is just another chapter in Earth's closing history, it makes it easier to cast all your cares upon him. You don't need to know how to manage Bitcoin. You don't need to know how to where to move money in the stock market. That's for down here. You don't need to know, should you buy your house? Should you sell another house? Should you move to another place? Because when you cast all your cares upon Jesus, he's the investment banker that knows you need a little bit of prayer here. I need to remove some of these friends from your life. I need to bring you this type of influence. I need to reinvigorate your prayer life. In other words, Jesus Christ becomes your spiritual investment advisor. And when you cast all your cares upon him, Lord, I don't have the education. I don't have enough money in my bank account. Man, he will start to pour out blessings from heaven that you will not have enough room. Not enough room to store them. And your blessings can be passed on to other people as an additional blessing. So I close with saying this: we're living in a perilous times. Vote for who you think will keep this earth safe again, but it's not going to become great again. But all that passion that some of you have about Trump, Biden, about Democrats and Republicans, you need to revert to, I have one person I want for president. I have one party that I want to rule. I'm just looking to support and be part of one person's team. His first name is Jesus. His last name is Jesus. My person for president, my party for rule, my kingdom to come. Who do I want? Not in the White House, but on the throne. It's Jesus, Jesus, and Jesus. When Granny got the passport to have her immigration to come to the United States, and Mama had her passport, and her children got their passport, it wasn't because there were such wonderful persons. It was because of Jesus and Jesus. When I was bullied as a child and survived that bullying, 6 attempts on my life. How did I survive it? Did I know some secret martial arts? Did I know how to defend myself with punches and kicks? No, it was Jesus and Jesus and Jesus who protected me when I almost flunked out of Loma Linda. How did I get to the point where I got all these degrees? Am I that smart? Does this big head mean that I have knowledge? No, it was Jesus who told me the right answers on the test. It's Jesus who continues to give me the knowledge. Every time I look at a failure in my life, every time I look at an opportunity in my life, every time I look at a blessing in my life and I try to figure it out and I can't figure it out, the one thing that keeps coming up time and time again, it was Jesus then, it's Jesus now, and it will be Jesus forever. And so if you want to survive this perilous time, young people, speak to the old, cast all your cares upon him, get the extra oil, become sheep and not goats. And if you're warm, if you're cold, stay there so God can work with you. But if you're lukewarm, it's time to cast your cares upon him, because we're living, but we'll survive another perilous times. Let us pray. Dear God, we're so thankful for the message of Peter, that in spite any figure that appears like Nero, that we know you shall give us the power of salvation. We ask for a reinvigorating spirit in our youth, which are absent from our churches. You brought us to this country, Lord, not just for financial benefit, but for the spiritual benefit of expanding your kingdom and helping our countries back home. Be with Pastor Drakes, be with my sister Dion, be with all of the members of LEAM, because the work that they're doing is an important work. Whether they have one church member or 1,000 church members, it's a work that must go forward and be finished for God. In Jesus'